Hey, Chris.
Hey Josh, how's it going?
Going well, man. I'm really glad that I can be joined by you today in conversation. You're an incredibly impactful and influential individual within this space. I know a lot of people that have worked with you, got awards, and that are kind of like pushing the talk forward. And they're all out there doing good because they've been in your orbit and been inspired by you in some ways. And I'm really excited to kind of like learn how you do that, how you find time for yourself, how you find time for community, and pushing the narrative forward. I saw that you stopped drinking in 2007. I think we also have a lot to catch up on since then because the world of the NA space has drastically changed, even in the 8 years of my sobriety. And I think there's a lot that we can kind of like target from conversation and language pushing through that. So thanks so much, first of all, for all that you do and for joining me today.
Well, thank you for those very kind words, and thank you for allowing me to have a chance to chat with you today. Looking forward to all the conversation, and like you said, a lot's changed in 8 years, and yeah, it's been 18 years since my last drink. So, so yeah, the world's changed a lot.
Yeah. So walk me back there a little bit. Kind of drop us into what you were doing in life. What was your lifestyle like around that time, and what was your relationship with alcohol before you decided to make a change?
Yeah, I'll give you the short version. The 2 minute story. Started drinking at 16. Big part of that was feeling like I belonged, feeling like I connected with other people. It was kind of the social currency of our little community as young suburban, young men. And that followed me into college, joined a fraternity, drank, partied. But I was really able to see that my drinking was not the same as everyone else's. I was really noticing that people would go to class and they would, have jobs and have relationships, and all I could do was drink, and it was really a marked difference. I think in high school, I still kind of kept up the game and kept up appearances. I think college was the real divider between people who could handle their alcohol and drink more normal. I mean, college is a very abnormal place to drink, but their alcohol consumption had a stopping point, and mine did not. I just kept drinking. Got sober at 23, went to treatment, was not really serious about going to treatment, but then just realized that if I kept drinking, life would continue to get really, really bad. And I was already at 23, I had seen enough and done enough, and just realized that alcohol was not serving me in any real ways. Um, yeah, but at that time, I just thought that life could not be fun or enjoyable without alcohol. I mean, those college years, those formative years of social development when you're like, this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go out, you're supposed to party. And I just believe that if I were to let go of alcohol, I would be letting go of the opportunity to engage in not just friendships, but romantic relationships. I just really believe that this is going to be the end of my social life. And then towards the end of my drinking, I lost all of my friends. No one wanted to be around me. I lost that one thing that I drank for was the social connection, and alcohol took that away. And so while it wasn't easy to stop, it made sense to stop because I knew I could point to alcohol being a direct cause of the lack of connection that I had in my life.
When you say it, wasn't easy to stop, what were you working with at that point? 23 is incredibly young. As you said, it's formative. What kind of conversations were you having with yourself at that time? And what did community look like for you then?
I mean, my community just got narrower and narrower. I think it's kinda like the end of a party when people kinda thin out. It's that same kind of like, "Where did everyone go, and where did that person go?" You just realize that slowly people start exiting your life because it's hard to be around someone who is self-immolating with alcohol. It is so hard to see someone burn every good thing about them away, and, that drifting away from people caused my already pretty active social anxiety to get even worse, right? As I was losing people, I would drink to cope with that anxiety of losing community, and those drunken nights would cause more distance and disconnection. It was just this negative feedback loop of like drinking to cope with the anxiety of losing people, and then losing people, and then drinking because I didn't know how to. Yeah, I didn't do with people. And what I also realized too, just now, is that a lot of my friends were 19 to 22. They didn't have any idea how to help somebody. They were kids themselves, you know? They just knew that they didn't wanna be around me anymore, and I don't think they had the language to say, like, "I think you need some help." My life just I think the conversations I was having with myself were just riddled with despair and full of hopelessness. I did not see a way that I could stop drinking, and I did not see a way that I could ever be social without drinking. I just there just wasn't a model for me that existed that I could point to and say, "Hey, that's how you can do it. That's how you can be a 20-something-year-old, have a full, vibrant life, travel, eat really good food, hear great bands, do all the things you wanna do, and be alcohol free." The template did not exist around me at the time.
Some of your language start to change in treatment. What was that turnaround like?
Yeah, again, like I went into treatment just to avoid, negative consequences. I just get my mom off my back, get my family off my back. It was three hots and a cot, three meals a day, some place to chill. Didn't have to really think about much, and I was pretty sure I was going to go back to drinking as soon as I uh, left treatment. Like that was the plan that I walked in there with. Because that was not my first treatment stint. But this time, I just realized that first of all, I had a doctor who explained to me about the anxiety piece, which I had never even thought of prior to that. I just thought I had a drinking problem. No one ever said, "Hey, you may have a little bit of an anxiety disorder. Hey, you might have some traumatic stress you're dealing with from childhood." These are things that just no one ever told me. And the second someone said it to me, it was like it makes sense. Like I could connect the pieces of the puzzle, and because I was sober, I could hear what someone was saying instead of filtering it through all that alcohol, right? People would try to get through to me when I was drinking, and I couldn't hear it, right? But, being abstinent from alcohol allowed me to hear what people were saying, helped me to understand that this was really a mental health, issue, and that just gave me enough grace for myself to, like, listen to what was being said, in treatment, which ultimately saved my life.
Yeah, that's something I don't hear a lot of people talk about a lot is, especially in the drinking self, you're almost on defense all the time. Like you know what others could be saying about you and you do your damnedest to like not make sure that you don't hear it or to make sure that it's not said. And in doing so, you're always kind of like on that back foot and you're never really pressing forward for any sort of change. And it sounds like you were able to kind of like see yourself for the first time. It sounds like in that sobriety, like you're acknowledging your truths, which may be difficult, especially spanning from childhood. I had some difficult moments in my childhood that were definitely repressed. And, I would find them in moments of alcohol, like, fits of emotion that were rare in other occurrences. How did you start walking in that direction when you're like, oh man, I think this is Chris. I think this is what he's capable of. Like, what did you do with that kind of like newfound sense of self?
It was really scary. I mean, as you say that now, I'm really picturing myself 23 years old, just getting out of treatment, and I didn't know how to be. I didn't know how to, like, they call it growing up in public. Like, I didn't know how to do anything. I started drinking when I was 16, and I really stopped developing any other skills, any social, emotional skills beyond survival. And towards the end of my drinking, I was absolutely drinking in survival mode. If I did not drink, my body would physically start shaking and detoxing, right? Like I needed alcohol to survive. Not everyone's case, I understand, and that's just my experience. But yeah, I found myself in this place where I did not know how to be with myself. I think a lot of, and I mean, even now, as I'm talking about this now, it was all external, right? I'm talking about all these external things. I'm talking about the friends. That's why I started drinking to stay friends. Is why I kept drinking. Losing friends is why I got, and it was all external. And what those first 30 to 60, 90 days of my sobriety were the internal journey. It was about me reconnecting with myself and then sometimes connecting. Like there was no disconnection because parts of myself hadn't been developed yet. I hadn't developed a sense of what I like. It was always mirroring what other people liked around me, right? I was I always prided myself of being a social butterfly in high school, but really I was just mimicking whatever social group I was around. So around the skaters, I was, a skater. Around the, country boys, I was, wearing my boots and talking about country music. I was always something and someone else. And the first couple of months of my sobriety were about just deciding who I was and deciding who I want to be.
Tell me about what was shining through. Who'd you find?
First of all, I realized I was a lot more sensitive than I thought I was. And that was uncomfortable. Still is kind of uncomfortable to think about. But yeah, I was a much more sensitive person. I think I've always been sensitive. And as a boy, and as a black boy, frankly, being a sensitive creature is not always the most celebrated thing. I was always taught to toughen up and be strong and don't be afraid. And I was afraid. And I was strong, but I also experienced a lot of things that were really tough. Being able to see that side of myself, this soft, sensitive, deeply emotionally intelligent human being emerge was like watching a butterfly come out the cocoon. It was like this process where I was watching myself make peace with like, no, this is who you are. You're emotional. You are, you know, a kind person even when no one's looking. This is who you are. You're also still very anxious and it was so cool and it still is. I mean, for all the cool things that we're going to talk about, all the things I've accomplished and all the ways I've helped people, I think the coolest thing that I have is this ongoing relationship with myself, this ongoing exploration. There are whole continents of myself that I have not even explored yet. And that's just exciting, right? I stand at the edge of one part of myself and I can see across the ocean and see like, hey, there's this version of you that's worth exploring.
It's so incredible to hear, man. Because I think a lot of us don't realize that in our drinking selves, the furthest person that we're away from is ourselves. And whether we're aware of what we're trying to lock away one drink at a time, or if it's just like that absent discovery of the self that has been washed away night after night of just that kind of like continued drinking. So it's really beautiful to hear you talk about that, especially finding that, there was probably some underlying sympathy for yourself. Did you find that coming to terms with your own, emotions made it a little bit easier to give yourself the grace to move forward and it didn't keep you too attached to the past self?
Yeah, it really did. Still believe that the strongest version of myself was the self that went through the worst of my drinking. That is not the weakest version of myself. That is the absolute strongest version. I don't think, I'm 42 years old. I don't think 42-year-old me could endure what 23-year-old me, 22-year-old me was dealing with. I just don't think that I have it in me. But that version of me, 22-year-old me, went through so much, it dealt with so much, lived in constant fear and agony. And I have so much more respect for that version of myself. I see often a lot of the people I work with, a lot of my friends will try to bury that version of themselves. Like that's the old me. That's the me that I don't want to. And it's like to deny that part of you, to bury that part of you is to bury the strongest part of you. The part of you that was able to be the load bearing version of you that could withstand the greatest weight and pressure and still survive. I think when I integrate that part of myself, I first of all, I get to take that part of myself along the journey, right? That 22-year-old Chris gets to live with 42-year-old Chris and gets to understand just how amazing it is to be alcohol free. Understands just all these things that I get to experience are because of that young man. And that's really
Yeah, I was guilty of that as well. I saw it as a version of myself that I had to squash, that I had to leave behind because you don't view it as like the self that was bearing the brunt of the world that you were living in at the time. And you view it, it's really easy to view it as like you were only making bad decisions. There's the person that was making bad decisions, but they're also the person that you weren't giving credit to, who was little by little, maybe in the efforts that you weren't privy to, was taking the steps to become the 42-year-old version of yourself now. And I had that same sort of revelation where I was like, this isn't a person that I need to leave behind. This is a person that this is something that I'm growing through. And that person's with me as much as like the childhood version of myself that I need to heal in a lot of ways as well. And it wasn't beneficial to me to try to leave pieces of me behind, because the whole self isn't going to shine unless the whole self is present in those moments.
No, not at all. And that's so true. But the whole self has to come along for the journey. And just right now when you were talking, I got this weird I have a very, very vivid imagination. And I was imagining like imagine like a pilot that has like successfully, put to ground several planes that were inoperable, right? Took on some kind of damage, had an engine failure, and they were able to land that plane. That is an experienced pilot. That is someone that can navigate the worst of situations. Now, a pilot that's never had that happen, who's flown hours and hours, doesn't have that same experience. And I think that that's like when we discard that part of ourselves, we're discarding the pilot that has real battle tested experience, really knows how to handle the hardest things when things fail, when things don't work out. And I will tell you unequivocally, that version of me helps me today in business, helps me be the entrepreneur that I am because it knows how to handle things when it is the darkest.
I want to ask you, because that version of myself would show up sometimes. It would come like a knock on the door when I wasn't expecting company, and I would do my best to like hide. I'd go to a different room. I'm like, oh, I'm not dealing with that. And then eventually, when I learned it wasn't something I was leaving behind, it was really easy for me to open up the door because I knew they might come in, they might have a cup of coffee, but they weren't going to be there long. They're never there as long as I thought they would be, and they disappear. And somehow, when I send them off, they're a little bit better than the damaged version that they arrived as. And I think that's just me healing the current self by being kinder to the past self. How are you talking to that version of Chris when he shows up now?
He's moved away from being you know, periodic, sporadic kind of gets to being someone that's in the neighborhood, right? Like someone that I wave to daily. I really truly believe that that is my reality. That version of myself is more than welcome to come in. And I think guilt and shame is what drives that version of me away. Like he feels shame. He feels like he's overstaying his welcome. And that's not true, right? Like this world, this life that we've all created, all 42 versions of myself, we've all created this. And it's as much his life as it is mine, this version of myself. This is all one long story. And that version of me at chapter 22 and chapter 23 are just as part of the story and could not this version, this story, however it's going to end, I hope it ends a long time from now, could not exist without those chapters of my life. And so, yeah, whenever that version of Chris shows up, I just try to remind him that he's a survivor, that he's a pilot, that he's navigated hard things, and that I wouldn't be who I am without him. Um,
We recognize that this is a solo journey and it has to be. We can't be good for others unless we're good for ourselves. But as you're walking this path, at which is there a time that you can recognize when you decided to begin illuminating that path for others? Folks can't join you the same way that you join yourself, but in your efforts, you kind of allow more room for folks to see the life that you're living. You can offer some advice, some words. When did it strike you that, the way that you were living was something that you could help afford to others?
No, I still feel like I'm not a guru. I still think I don't have that all figured out. I still feel like the one thing that we talked about that I do have is this version of myself that I kind of integrate into who I am. Beyond that, if you were to ask me anything else, I would not have the same level of confidence, Josh. Like, this me, this version of me, this Chris Marshall that people know is not perfect. It is deeply flawed. Is still growing and figuring things out and gets things wrong all the time. I just believe that part of why I drank so hard and for so long was because of silence. I really believed that I had to silence the worst parts of myself. that was the only way I was gonna get through life was to, like, shove it down, bury it, silence it, uh, and all of my sobriety has been about giving that part of myself light, giving the darkest parts of myself light. And so it's more of a byproduct of my sobriety journey than it is like a desire to like illuminate myself and say like, oh look, the illumination isn't for everyone else. It's for me. Right. Like I show up the way that I show up. I share with people what I share because it's for me. If other people gain something from that, that's fantastic. I mean, again, I'm talking about more in the sobriety realm than I am business, but even in business, I try to be as transparent as I can because that is how I stay well. I know when I'm not well when I start hiding things, when I start being secretive about things, when I start like pretending to be happy when I'm not, or pretending to be confident when I'm anxious. Like that's always a red flag for me. So I guess to answer your question, like, I decided to start sharing it uh, early on, like as early as I could. And I think that's, became a counselor. And as a counselor, realized that I was really great at just kind of connecting with people. And connection has always been my jam. It's something I've always cared about. It's why I drank. I drank for connection. So it's like to be able to connect with other people who are going through it and to be a wounded healer and to share like what I had learned, that's always been it's been a strength. So that's kind of where that started for me. It was like like in my job as a counselor, just kind of pouring into people and kind of refining that skill.
What ways did you start to find connection without alcohol? Like when you started to involve friends, did you find that you were gaining friends back? What were you doing? What did that look like? Because I had the same thing. I was like, when I stopped drinking, I was like, what am I gonna do? Like, do I go bowling? Like, all my first thoughts were just do the stuff you did in high school before you started drinking, because you literally no other life beyond that.
Which I think is a real question for most people that stop drinking. Like whenever you started drinking, um, is less important as when you stop, because when you stop, it depends on what phase of your life you're in. And I just so happened to be in the early 20s. And this was just when Facebook was becoming, social media wasn't what it is today. But I could see my friends going to Cabo San Lucas and partying, or going to Breckenridge and going skiing. I could see my friends living the life with each other and having this kind of like brotherhood that I always wanted. And it sucked. It sucked not to be able to join them. But at 18 months into my sobriety, I found myself going with those same friends to a bachelor party in New Orleans, and I was the only sober person, and it was really cool. Those were all my drinking buddies. Half of them were in the Navy, half of them were, just really hard drinkers. And it was amazing how we went to New Orleans, and the entire time we were there, no matter how intoxicated they got, it was a bachelorette or a bachelor party, so it's a lot of drinking going on. They were always like making sure I was okay, making sure I was good. They really looked out for me, and of course, they were knocked out. In the mornings, I walk down, Bourbon Street. Bourbon Street at 6 a.m. is an amazing place to be.
Yeah, I've seen
It
it.
it's just like, was this the same place 2 hours ago? But, New Orleans in the morning is beautiful. Most great cities are like that. They're really beautiful in the morning, and so I just it's examples like that where just like my friends slowly kind of came back to me. A lot of them just again didn't know what to say when I was in the middle of it. And so to see me out of my drinking, people were really, really supportive. But I also knew that those friends weren't the kind of friends I needed long term, because most of what we had in common was just alcohol. There was a lot of grief around my friend. I really thought we were really, really good friends, and it's not that we weren't, it was just that it was all framed by alcohol, and when you remove alcohol, there wasn't much there. I had so many friends that had these long the 3 a.m. conversations about life and the universe and parallel universes. We'd have, wax poetic about, what love really means, and you remove alcohol from that, those conversations are still real, but there's not much substance beyond those conversations. And those are the same conversations I could have with someone on a flight to LA, right? Like that doesn't mean that just because we had these conversations did not mean that we were really good friends. So there was a lot of grief that came with, you know, getting sober and trying to make friends again.
Yeah, definitely. I had similar experiences and, you can kind of equate it to work friendships as well. Like that doesn't only happen within alcohol, work some of these jobs were just like, especially in hospitality, like you're just in it together. Like you're experiencing things that like it's tough to explain to normies that work regular 9 to 5 and stuff like that. And, when you're in the trenches with these folks, you're just like, you get me, like you and me forever, man. And then something else comes up and you take that job and you're like, oh, where's so and so? I haven't chatted with them in like 2 years. Like, were we really ever as close as we were just the stuff that we were going through at the time?
Yeah, I mean, it's trauma bonds are a real thing, and it's like there's no greater trauma bond than, being beat in the weeds and, hospitality, right? Like it cements you to someone, but for a time. And I've tried to go back, sometimes you go back to those to the relationships and you're just like, I mean, I guess you're a cool person, but like that closeness that we felt, some of the first men I hugged in life were, men that I worked in restaurants with, like, hey, that weren't related to me. They're just like friends, like we go through this. And yeah, if I saw them today, I'd be like, hey, how's it going? And keep walking.
Yeah. Well, you even reference like talking to somebody on a plane. Like I've had some of those like really intense conversations on a plane. And then the second that bell dings and you get up, you're like, okay, enjoy Dallas, man.
Yeah, yeah, just like
And you're
never see that person
strangers at the
again.
luggage line.
Yeah, yeah, I think we should do a better job at normalizing impermanence and connection. I really, again, someone who just fundamentally believed that I would never find a community. I would never find friends. I would never find love. I would never find family. Like I believed that I was always just that wasn't for me. And somehow I had missed the directions, and I just never was going to be able to have that true connection. I put a lot of value on permanency, like on like this has to be the crew, this has to be the friend group, or this has to be the friend. And yeah, the older I get, the more and more comfortable with things having a natural conclusion. And when they're over, they're over.
Let's stay on that connection path. And, 10 years after you get sober comes Sands Bar.
Yeah.
How'd that come to be?
Yeah. So 10 years of sobriety, which is just a wild thing to think, but like 10 years of my life had passed. I'm in my early 30s now. I was a counselor for 8 years. And in those years of being a counselor, I kind of just started to see a reoccurring pattern. I was working at a mental health facility here in Austin. And it's kind of like McDonald's of mental health, where you're like seeing, my case was like 300 people. Like it was insane, right? Most of these people were coming in because they had some kind of a legal problem, or they were medical professionals who were taking some oxys while they were treating people, like whatever the case was. I was working with a lot of people and I was hearing the same thing over and over again, which is I know alcohol's not serving me. I know it's not helpful. I know I need to stop. I know I don't have a problem with it. Like I can stop drinking. I don't know what to do with my life when I stop. And it very so much echoed what I was feeling 10 years earlier when I stopped drinking. Like, what do you do when you stop drinking? Where do you go when you stop drinking? And so I had the idea for Sam's Bar a year before I actually did anything about it, because I just didn't think it was for me. I was like, I got a stable life. I got, at this point, I had a wife and had 2 kids. Like, look, my life is good. And I'm sober. I've been sober a decade. This is the perfect life. There's no reason to muck it up with some entrepreneur wild idea. Like, stop. Just live your life. Like, play it safe. Play it between the lines. And then I had a client who the last conversation that we had before she lost her life due to drinking was her desire for some place to be, some place that she could go and take some of her work colleagues that did not include alcohol. And I know that it wasn't my fault. I know that it wasn't. But I always felt like that person did not have to lose their life if there was some place that they could have gone. That it was just a life, and we lose so many people because they have nowhere to go. And so they have to settle for places that serve alcohol, or maybe a place that, maybe has the one mocktail, but there was no place for just people who were choosing to live an alcohol-free life. So after losing that client, I just stopped caring so much about playing between the lines. It could have failed. It could have not worked out, but I was gonna at least try because I knew that I deserved it. I deserved a place like this. I needed a place like this. I know other people did. I make it about other people, but I also need this. 23-year-old Chris needed this. 33-year-old Chris needed it at the time, right? Like I needed a place to go where I could know that everything that I was going to drink was not going to trigger me or send me back into drinking.
Yeah, and that lasting power, like, really speaks volumes. I even with it, I know that I'm closer to it than most, but even with all of the support, I feel like more often than not, I see a post about a place opening, and before I can even find my way to go visit it, I see a post that this place has closed. You know, you know better than anybody else, like, Austin's a party town. What gives something like Sandbar lasting power within that community?
Yeah, I mean, and this is something that I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur. I didn't have any aspirations of being a business, person or, helping other people start businesses. But one thing that I understood was that this would be a slow experience, low and slow, like barbecue, right? Like that's how you change something at a chemical level, right? You have to move slowly. And I think that what happens with a lot of these non-alcoholic, well, all businesses, right? Especially food and beverages, super, super, like, margins are just ridiculous, right? But when it's a new concept like non-alc, I think a lot of people just have this good idea. They think that if they build it, they will come, and they don't build community and they don't build connection, and they just move too big too fast and they fail very fast. I've seen it happen time and time again. The reason why I think Sandspar has worked is because I continue to find situations and ways that I can make this work in a way that's sustainable. The first iteration of Sandspar was a backyard of a hair salon slash antique shop. I had folding tables and plastic cups. Like people were sorely disappointed when like this is what you call a sober bar, but that's what I could do with a counselor's salary and my wife's teacher salary. Like that's what I could afford. And I've never taken on any debt. I've never had to take out a loan. I've only been able to build and sustain at the rate that I could, right? I've only put profits back into the business. That's the only way I've been able to sustain this. And I think because of that, that's why we've been able to stay around as long as we've had. We're coming up on year 9. And it's like I didn't imagine this would be. I thought this was gonna be one event, right? But it just took its own. It happened on its own. So yeah, I think that's the answer. Is that like I've done things that aren't very orthodox. I've taken situations that aren't very orthodox. People want me to be open more than I am. People want me to open a second location and this and that. It's like, are you gonna be there every day? Are you gonna write me a check for $500,000? No. Okay. Well then we're gonna be open when we can, and we're gonna do what we can, and we're gonna operate at the rate that we need to because that's true to who we are right now.
That's awesome. Congrats on 9 years, by the way. That's truly incredible. Tell me a little bit about the academy, and then while we're on the subject of academy, tell me about how the awards came to be and what that means to you to be able to recognize so many greats within the industry.
Okay. Well, Sandspar Academy came as a result of that very experience I was just talking about, right? People would call me, quote unquote, pick my brain, which, oof, that and the word exposure, the two most triggering things. When people say those words to me, I just, ugh. But if people call it pick my brain, try to understand like what I understood about this space. And they take that 30-minute call with me, take what little information I gave them, extrapolate everything that they could out of that, and then try to go open up something. And they'd be closed in 6 months. And I was like, okay, we got to figure something out. So I'm going to offer this course. It's going to be 10 weeks because you know what? 10 weeks is about the length a good idea starts to become, you know, you start to realize if it's something you just love or you love the idea of something. 10 weeks is it's a good metric. And in those 10 weeks, we're going to build community between other entrepreneurs and founders who are getting off the ground the same time you are. We're going to connect you to all the leaders and makers of these products so that you get to know them and they get to know you. And you're going to walk away with a pitch. But most importantly, I'm going to burst your bubble. Right. Most people that come in or they walk away disappointed, right? They walk away thinking, so I don't need to start a bar. What I need to do is a set of pop-ups. I have no food and beverage experience. I don't know the first thing about ordering anything. And I probably need to get a lot of experience, right? Before I learn to fly a plane, I should probably learn the mechanics of how a plane works, right? Like that's kind of the idea. And then the Sandsmart Academy Awards, I want this to be more than a fad, right? You look at the plant-based market, you look at, some of these other kind of movements that have happened around food and beverage. And what distinguishes the ones that kind of go and fade into obscurity and the ones that stay is this ability to create culture. And culture is one facet of culture is the ability to like retain record. And so the Sandsbar Academy Awards are just nothing but a way for us to, memorialize what we are doing as an industry, as a movement. In 100 years, I think people will look back and say that what we're doing today has a direct impact on the way things are 100 years from now. And so this is just the way of like we're early in this thing, and I really wanted to create a way to do that. It's a night we all get dressed up. It's November 8th here in Austin, Texas this year, and you get dressed up and we have this award show. You get to hold an award and talk about your category. It's just like, a big award show for non-alc.
I love that. Chris, I have one final question for you.
Yeah.
This might be the most difficult. What do you love about yourself?
I love that I'm so creative. I do. I love how distractible I am and how the highest form of like I'm having a good the highest form of like pleasure and excitement for myself is just creating in a lot of different ways. I love that about myself. I love that I can be with myself. I love that I'm changing. I love that I still love words the same way I did when I was 5 years old. I still read the dictionary. I love who I am. And I love who I'm becoming and I love who I was. So yeah, that's a great question.
Well, I've loved meeting you, Chris. Thanks so much for the time today, and I'm thrilled to see what happens next.
Well, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it, Josh.